We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And as we've been doing, redoing starting last week and now this week, we are continuing with our replay series this week with episode 3 of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But before we dive into episode 3, there is something that kind of came up when I was editing episode 2 that I just want to also add, because we spent a long time defending John Walker.
To our chagrin.
Yeah, and that was tough. And we won't be doing that this episode, trust me. He also didn't have a lot of screen time, but even in his screen time this episode, he was not great. But there is something that I think we missed when we were talking about John and, kind of his, what we called promotion from regular decorated U.S. Army soldier to Captain America. And that was basically, we said, hey, John didn't make the decision to reignite Captain America or bring a new Captain America into the picture. He just basically tried out and got promoted. But I do think that there is something important to recognize here, which is that he basically benefited from a broken system, right? The system did not treat Sam's decision with respect. They did not respect his decision as the person whom Steve selected as his successor. And in doing that, I think that even that already says a lot about John and him not really thinking more deeply about what his actions mean. He basically just said, oh, great, there's an opportunity for advancement. There's an opportunity to do more. I'm gonna take that opportunity and I'm gonna run with it. And at no point, at least to our knowledge, did he question the decision to, recast Cap, if you will, or at no point did he even consider maybe not taking the opportunity because it wasn't the right thing to do. And that's just another way that he, separates himself from Steve, and not in a good way, because Steve was always questioning the system. And I think John directly benefiting from that really just kind of lays the foundation for all of the things that we're going to see in his regression over the series.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when you do compare him to Steve, I mean, Steve also didn't know he was becoming Captain America.
Yeah.
Which I think is what's so interesting about this is, if you really do want to do the quick comparison, is Steve wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to fight in the war. Obviously, I mean, his asthma alone gets him kicked off the list. We all know that. And he goes in because of the serum. He doesn't know he's getting tied into the bells and whistles of it. That's kind of the entire plot of the first movie, as he's trying to move past that, because the whole point for him was to help fight, to defend his country and allies and everything of that nature. What's interesting about this is, although John is I just want to get to work, he signed up with the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
He signed up to be put in the suit. And so it is kind of interesting when you look at it from that perspective too, that when you really want to think about who Steve is versus who John is, They signed up for two very different things. And to your point, John at no point really is like, maybe this isn't for me to do. He wants the attention. He wants he wants the bells and whistles. He wants all the perks that comes with putting on that suit because he's seen them. Even if he wants to act like he wants to get to work, yeah, but you like it,
Yeah.
and you wanted it, and and at no point did you question it. And so I think that's kind of an interesting perspective as well when you kind of look at the two of them in just perfect comparison to each other.
Totally. And I think that that is a perfect bridge into talking about episode 3 because, well, John didn't have a lot of screen time. What screen time he did have was very telling as he walks down this path away from good man John Walker into kind of crazy obsessed John Walker that does what he does in, episode 4. And so I think there were actually 2 scenes. I think they were the only 2 scenes John was in the entire episode. But he says 2 very important things in those scenes. First, when they are searching for Carly and they're trying to locate her, he and Lamar are basically, trying to interrogate this guy. And he screams in the guy's face, "Do you know who I am?" And it's an immediate signifier that he is now really using the title of Captain America to not only get his way, which we saw in the last episode, but also to intimidate people. And it's starting to go to his head. And then on top of that, later in the episode, you see him talking to Lamar, and he basically says, "Well, what does it matter how we go about doing it as long as we get the job done?" Which is an extremely dangerous line to blur. And he does that pretty quickly. And obviously, then, he goes into what he does in episode 4, and you see that line is just like non existent. But it starts this episode with him being willing to blur that line and not necessarily doing everything by the books. Because even though this is Captain America owned by the government, he doesn't feel like he has to, apply to any or be held down by any rules. And so, like I said, not a lot of time for John Walker, but a lot of important character development for him this episode.
John's downfall genuinely needs to be studied.
Yes.
Because to your point, it doesn't really take a lot of time. Like, if you guys really think about it, I mean, we all know what's coming in episode 4. That's that final moment, as far as I'm concerned, that solidifies the downfall.
Yeah.
My guy is named Captain America at the end of episode 1. We don't even actually meet him. We don't know who's under the mask.
Yeah.
We're introduced to him in episode 2, where we do have quite a bit of time with him. And then we get maybe 2 to 3 minutes of screen time with him in episode 3. And then we're going to get, I know he has a lot of screen time in episode 4, but we're going to have episode 4 and then downfall at the end of episode 4.
Yeah.
So it's actually quite impressive for any character to experience that level of just complete and utter, I almost said despair. I feel complete and utter despair when I think about John.
Total moral collapse. That's really the best way to put it.
Yes. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt, obviously, like in episode 2, because, when we do these replays, we come at it from a different light because we're looking at it from a different perspective. He really is just awful. Because even as I go to episode 3, I'm like, oh God, there. And I mean, we saw signs towards the end of episode 2 already.
Yeah.
But it's like, wow, this guy sucks. And to your point, he says 2 lines that I think are so reminiscent of just being a dangerous fella. And neither of them belong in Captain America's mouth. Listen, he is a dangerous fella, and that's what we call him. But
I'm so stuck on that.
He's a dangerous fella. I stand by the words that came out of my mouth. All right.
I don't disagree. I just think the word choice is fantastic.
It's where I'm at tonight. But either way, neither of those sentences need to be coming out of Captain America's mouth. I mean, one's an ego, just an egotistical statement straight out of the gate.
Uh-huh.
And the other one is sitting there and listen, Cap was always willing to break the rules. And I think there's a part of it where Cap has to be willing to break the rules. That is kind of the whole, hey, I'm going to stand in front of, as he does, the Nazis. I'm going to stand in front of Hydra. I'm going to stand in front of my own team if I have to.
Yeah.
And maybe he's not inherently breaking rules all the time, but he's standing up for what he believes in. John, on the other hand, he just wants to beat Bucky and Sam, essentially. He wants to prove himself, but he also feels like he has to do it before they do it because he's got some beef.
Well, and I also think, like, if you're comparing John and Steve, I think the big thing here, you mentioned, like, Steve is breaking rules. Steve is not following, what this prescribed idea of Captain America is, but you always get the sense that he's doing it to save people and for the greater good. But when John says, well, what does it matter as long as we get the job done? You don't get the sense that he really cares about any violence that the Flag Smashers may be perpetrating. The job to him is all about the accolades. He
Yeah.
just needs to prove that he's Captain America and he can get the job done. And he doesn't really care about the actual goal of the job, which is supposedly to be helping people, even though, and we'll get to this later because we actually got a really good additional look into more of the Flag Smashers this episode. But even though the Flag Smashers are someone or are a group who are not necessarily inherently bad, they're definitely getting more violent as the episodes go on, but they too have good intentions. And they're not doing this for power, they're doing it to help people. So even, their goal is like a little bit in a gray area, which is, important for this show because I think this show wants to make you think and it doesn't want to deal with black and white concepts. So I'm also excited to talk about the Flag Smashers this episode because I think they're quite the compelling group.
Well, let's talk about them because I do think, as antagonists go, they've always kind of been. I mean, I think they get kind of the short end of the stick when a lot of people talk about antagonists because they're a group for one. So
Yeah.
I think by default, that just kind of makes them a little less, dare I say, maybe just like iconic or something of that nature. But I also feel like they get brushed under the rug because people just don't feel like they're a super worthwhile antagonist. The thing is in anything relating to Captain America, this type of antagonist makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And I think they're, to your point, a very compelling antagonist because they are just trying to help people. And I think as we see the episodes go on, that is something that allows Sam to I know like him and Carly even have a conversation at one point
Yeah.
because he's like, I understand what you're trying to do. You are not inherently trying to do anything wrong. And I can't understand because I wasn't even here what it was like
Yeah.
when half of us were dusted. And it is a complicated thing, and that once again, all government bodies are not handling well, that all these people have come back and they're just kind of, obviously nobody knows how to handle something like that, but they're just kind of doing things that are not benefiting any of the people that actually were here, lived the past 5 years, suddenly had enough food, suddenly all had homes, and the people who came back, they're like, here, your house is right there, and they're just kicking everybody back out. People are sick again. Like, it's just hard to grasp, I think, that this is such a change for some of these people because some of these people feel like nothing changed at all. They were gone for 5 seconds. So, I think the Flag Smashers increasingly become compelling at the same time of becoming increasingly more dangerous.
Yeah, and I think that there's no accident that this episode starts with an ad for the GRC, right? They're trying to understand, or I'm sorry, establish what are the Flag Smashers really fighting against? Because I think, in episode 2, the GRC gets mentioned, they get brought up. You get a little bit of context for what they are, but this is only the second property post COVID. It's the third property post Endgame. I don't remember Spider-Man addressing the GRC. I know for a fact since we just did our replay that WandaVision does not address the GRC. So this is a completely new concept. So the idea that the Flag Smashers, that's really their main antagonist, if you're going to put them in the protagonist seat for a hot second. All we got was a line in episode 2. That ad was meant to establish this is what the GRC stands for. But then as you see throughout the episode, the actual execution of those stated goals has naturally been corrupted because one, it's a government, and two, it's humanity, right? Like humans are going to not always do the right thing. That's not me trying to defend them in any way. I'm just saying that was going to happen. And what the Flag Smashers are really fighting for is the people, to your point, who did stay, who were then displaced. They were fighting for the resources that the GRC, in their greed and in their corruption, are hoarding from people who need it. I mean, Carly in the episode looks at the guy, and what she does after this, there's no defending that. That's just cold blooded murder. But she looks at the GRC, I guess he was a security guard, and she says, "You have enough food here to feed people for 6 months, and there are people starving." Like, there really is no justification for the hoarding of resources in that way. And that's really what they're meant to fight. And then, to your point, what the Flag Smashers unfortunately do is they become more and more dangerous. It's not just, oh, we're going to rob a bank, which, that is also not great. But it's not just we're going to rob a bank. They weren't really hurting people, right? That was not the tactic that they were using. It was a lot of distraction. It was a lot of, creating confusion to be able to get away. The real reason that Torres gets hurt is because he goes, one-on-one against a super soldier, and that does not end well for him, obviously.
Yeah.
But the Flag Smasher member was not going to attack him until Torres attacked first. Not justifying what happened. I'm just saying they weren't going in there with the idea of violence, right? But then this mission, even though they get away scot-free and the security guards are tied up, Carly goes and she takes that extra step and she murders them in cold blood. And you can see even her fellow Flag Smasher looks at her and is like, there were people in there. Like, you just murdered them without a second thought. And that's where they start to be like, go from, I understand your reasoning, I can empathize with you, to beyond that place where it makes sense to be able to do that, because they have just basically made themselves into cold-blooded killers.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that's what's important here, is there's always a line and the antagonist has to cross it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we just kind of understand them the whole time, and that doesn't really work, does it? Because we as an audience can't be rooting for the antagonist, or at least being like, I don't really understand what they're doing wrong. But they do cross it fully here. And I think the other thing to kind of just bring up in general, and I feel like we had this conversation at some point between the two of us, not probably on the podcast, just probably as we were watching this or something like that, like the first time. But what's so important to remember is, and this is not to justify, but what is so important to remember is the super soldier serum will always enhance traits you already have.
Yep.
It is not just about giving somebody strength or anything else, or endurance and things like that. That's great too, but it is going to enhance the good or the bad.
Yep.
And I mean, we learned that in the very first Captain America when he's gonna take the serum. That's the whole point of that conversation with Dr. Erskine. Like, that's him saying, you have a good heart. I've picked the right person. And so, regardless of whether Carly is a good person or not, she has these underlying feelings and anger.
Yep.
Which is what has been driving her this whole time. And that is okay. But as the super soldier serum begins to continue to take hold in her and find its way the way it needs to settle, essentially, it's still going to continue to enhance inside of her the traits such as that anger, which is what I think we're also starting to see. We see she loses somebody who is very important to her. And in that moment, I think that was kind of a trigger as well, to sit there and know that person could have been saved.
Yep.
And she couldn't save them, even though she's been doing all this work to try and help other people. This person couldn't be saved. It was her Uncle Ben, if you will. And then you have this serum going through her veins. It's only enhancing this anger. She starts to strike out. And that's what I think we're seeing at this point. We're seeing that switch of just, we're not exactly doing it the right way, but we're trying to help people, to now just being like, we're trying to help people. Screw you if you stand in our way.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if you're not with us, you are our enemy, and you don't deserve to live, is what she basically said in this episode.
Yeah.
Which is, a step further than I think we've seen them go thus far.
Well, and then the other thing is just, you think about, if that's that first step, and I feel like it's always all it takes is that first step, because then you rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to ever stop. But the idea here is, think about the fact that their whole point is the earth is overpopulated. And when it wasn't, it was fine. And so now, how do you solve overpopulation? Because we don't have a Thanos coming in with 6 little stones on a gauntlet. Well, hey, if you're standing in my way and I'm trying to help people who don't have enough food or anything else, shelter, etc., not only are you an enemy, you are disposable.
Yeah.
And I don't mind getting rid of you because what you're not consuming, somebody who needs it could be consuming it.
Yeah. It's becoming a simple numbers game and the humanity is being removed,
Yes.
which is chilling.
Yes. 100%.
All right. We've talked about John Walker. We've talked about the Flag Smashers, but our duo, they go on quite the journey this episode. They start the episode by breaking out Baron Zemo, who is kind of cool. He
Wait,
is
because I love him.
he is the source of some of my deepest pain, but also like so just comes in and is their benefactor and is so suave. And I just find him endlessly entertaining in this episode. Obviously, as Katie mentioned last episode, the iconic fist bump move is just brilliant. But we get a really, really good look at the power broker, right? This is someone who has only ever been name dropped. We've seen them at the end of one of the episodes, I think it was last episode, go after the Flag Smasher, send their men. They've never, to our knowledge, appeared on screen, but we now understand that they are basically the leader of Madripoor, right? They are the leader of this community of underworld dealers of all kinds of things. And most importantly, they are the benefactor of the renewed super soldier serum.
Yes. I think there's a lot that we learn in this episode when based upon all of this. I think we get a lot of puzzle pieces put together. Obviously, we find out Isaiah is the one that they got the blood from.
Yep.
That they ended up being able to isolate all of the things they needed to create the super soldier serum. We meet the doctor of the creation. We learn that his creation he purposely made so that they don't look bulky and all that. Like there's a change to the serum itself. It is not the same as Bucky and Steve's. I also think it's really interesting because obviously, I mean, first off, Zemo shoots him. I get it. Like the man's got the vendetta.
Yeah. He is like a one track mind. He's using Bucky and Sam as much as they are using him.
Oh, 100%. But I also think the other thing before like he is shot is he mentions that he was dusted.
Yeah.
And during the fact that he had been dusted, that is kind of when this went a little AWOL for him.
Yep.
Or not really for him, more than just this is when it became out of control. And then we also learn a little later that Carly during that time had been in Madripoor and they were living there. And so this is how she gets her hands on the super soldier serum, steals it from the power broker because she probably didn't realize the power broker was the one who made it or had it made, I should say. And this doctor is just off floating in the abyss that they do when, the whole dusting happens.
Well, I think from a timeline perspective, let's clarify something actually. So he was actually working for the government, right? Prior to his being dusted.
I totally forgot that line.
Yeah, so actually during the 5 years that he's dusted, there's no development going on the reconstruction of the super soldier serum. And when he gets back, they basically were like, no, we've scrapped your project. Like, you were the only one who could do it. You went away. So that's when he goes to Madripoor and becomes the beneficiary of the power broker. And I believe Carly didn't go to Madripoor until after the blip as well. Because remember, during the period...
Maybe I just don't watch the show when I watch.
But I think because during the period of the snap and the blip, like those 5 years, she would have been living with ample resources.
No, you're like right. I just fully apparently don't conceptualize anything while I'm watching. And I don't even know I literally sat there and watched the episode and I was like, oh, that makes sense. And here I am like retelling it. I'm like, yeah, I just like made up my own story there.
You totally, I was vibing and then I was like, no, this is just blatantly wrong and I need to fix this.
No, I mean fair. I just apparently listen, guys. When Bucky's not there and he's not directly on the screen, I'm not sure I really care about what's being said at any given point. And so I think I just am like, show me Bucky again. And those are the thoughts running through my head when other people are on screen, and it doesn't really process. Yes, But we learned all this information, which is actually, again, really interesting because the other part of it for me, it kind of opens that door and maybe it gets addressed at the end of the series or throughout the rest of the series. I'm not really 100% sure. I don't remember. So that's something we'll have to wait for. But like, to me, it opens the door of it's easy still to remake the super soldier serum when you have super soldiers.
Yeah. Like if you have the right biochemist, I'm assuming that's what the guy was, to
Sure.
be able to isolate the specific ingredients out of the blood.
Think about all of this. Think about it. He got Isaiah's version,
Yeah.
which is an even more muddled version than anyone else's. He got the most muddled version of the super soldier serum that was out there.
Well, I don't know about that because how did they actually, where did Isaiah's version even come from? Like we know he was administered by the US government, but
Well, it's kind of annoying because when he said that it came from an American, obviously they meant Isaiah, but I was like, they do realize Bucky is American.
okay, that aside,
No. My point being is it could have been implied that it was Bucky, in which case I actually think it would have made more sense because he was under Hydra's control. Hydra had already been making more super soldiers, and he had talked about that being under Hydra at one point. And so, like, in my mind, I was like, I would have, if we had not been introduced to Isaiah, that would have, my assumption would have been that would have been Bucky, in which case I would have thought that made a lot more sense. Obviously, we see Bucky and Sam share a look, which is to imply they know he's talking about Isaiah. But then that is what opens those questions to me is like, we know his blood was being taken and all that stuff, but like, was the CIA the ones who gave him that blood, but like the blood? But I thought because he did say he was working with Hydra originally, right? Because then when Hydra fell, like he went into that whole thing.
yeah, so my understanding is that he was working for Hydra. Then, when Hydra fell, the US government recruited him. They had Isaiah's blood on file, right? Because he was in jail and they were taking blood samples from him. And it was through using Isaiah's blood that he was able to deduce what the ingredients were. My question, though, is where did Isaiah's version come from? Because the whole thing for the longest
Steve.
time,
It has to be Steve.
but the whole thing though was like Bruce was trying to recreate the serum, right? But nobody could because it wasn't Erskine. The only reason that Hydra was able to do a version of it was because they had that spy, who I think he died at the end of in the first Avenger, but it's assumed that that was how they got the information, right? Because if he was caught, then they probably had others. That was how Hydra was able to do it because they had plants within the government to be able to spy. But that's why I thought it was so hard to recreate, and that's why Bruce, was doing the stuff with the gamma because we couldn't recreate Erskine's experiment. And I know, like, the idea is like Isaiah's supposed to be hidden, he's supposed to be, put in jail, but that doesn't answer the question of like where did
They
the serum
had
that he
to
was
have had
given?
Steve's blood.
I guess.
And somebody had to have figured it out before to help make Isaiah. And that's what was missing from Dr. Banner's is they were essentially using what they already had, deconstructing it, figuring out what was in it to rebuild it. He was just shooting in the dark. Like he was using, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of science involved. I'm not gonna sit there and like say it wasn't, but that like, I mean, my guy's out here with gamma radiation, like trying to recreate this. I would have to think they had Steve's blood somewhere.
Okay, sure. Like that part's not far fetched. I guess where I'm getting stuck is like there were no more super soldiers after Isaiah, right? Like if they had the formula and they knew it worked, and then they had Isaiah's blood on top of it, why were they not creating more? And then on top of that, we know that Bruce was working for the government when he was doing the experiments that turned him into the Hulk because Ross was someone who he was working with.
Listen, I don't know. I can tell you all about the Hydra program, but I can't really tell you what was happening over in the US, all right? I mean, it is kind of interesting because we do have so much information regarding the super soldier or just like in general, the Winter Soldier, super soldier and like realm. We have so much information including the Red Room. And so, like, that is kind of crazy to be able to tell you that we could pull all of that apart. And I could answer every single one of your questions about how Russia and everybody else on that side were doing things. I don't know because up until this moment, we are understood that Steve has only ever been the one and only successful American super soldier. I mean, because, birth area aside, obviously Bucky was being claimed by the Russians and by Hydra and everything else. So and also was made by them. So the only one that America has successfully made. I don't know how Isaiah exactly would have been made without there being additional files that was there, and why his information wasn't being given to Banner, if Banner was supposed to be working on this and recreating it either. I actually feel like, unfortunately, Isaiah just kind of starts to put a wrench in the whole thing because it doesn't make sense. And I understand they put him under the rug and they said, okay, we're ignoring that this guy happened, other than the fact we're going to literally pull him dry of blood. I don't really know. I don't know why there weren't more, other than the fact that maybe, I mean, look what happened when Hydra tried to make more. Not successful. So I don't know.
Yeah, but that was also, I think that had something to do too with the mind control. Like the mind control didn't work the same way it did on Bucky. Like they weren't able to control their super soldiers.
Yeah, but it wasn't just control, more than they were also just, they were getting violent. Like they were getting overly violent, and when I say out of control in this sake, I don't mean out of control just because they're not listening to orders. Like they were genuinely just, their temperaments were all messed up, and so they were getting literally like out of control. So I do wonder if they were experiencing that on the American side as well, that they, unfortunately, the other people they tried to utilize as super soldiers were not, it either was not taking to them. Because also think about some of the other science things that we've seen. Like I'm thinking of extremis. Like think about how that process is and how it's so risky that like one small move that person can literally blow up. So it's like, think about all of the factors that go into it, a person's genetics. For the super soldier serum, it goes into who they are as a person. Again, back to what Dr. Erskine told us from the jump.
Yeah.
Your temperament is affected. If you're a bad person, you're going to be a worse person. And so I do maybe just wonder if it was another kind of case of what happened a little bit with Hydra, where they like hit the lottery the first time and then were not able to
And the
actually
second time,
successfully.
really, on the American side. Because you had Steve and then you had Isaiah, both of which, are good dudes and are able to, understand right and wrong still, even with the serum. And then other, to your point, variables in personality for anyone who would have been given the serum after maybe were unsuccessful.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. So maybe that's just how that went. And they kind of had the same thing happening in tandem on different sides of the world. And obviously in the arms race of just, we were successful with this one. This one's been working. Just send him out, do what you got to do. The other ones are just not, it's not working out for us.
Yeah. Interesting. I just, with all this talk about super soldier serum, it made me wonder because I was like, yes, Isaiah is technically the source of this new round of super soldier serum, but somebody had to be his source.
Yeah. And he's already a diluted version of the super soldier serum, which you could tell because the guy's aging.
True.
So, like, it's not a fully comprehensive serum because he has been aging, and Bucky still looks entirely the same. I mean, obviously, the actor himself has aged, but like, he still is implied to look exactly the same. Same with Steve. Like, they've been fine. So, it is kind
Well,
of
some of that
interesting.
though is like they both were like frozen, cryogenically frozen for long periods of time.
Yes, yes, but still, like, the whole point is it's supposed to slow down the aging. They are in their hundreds.
Yeah, this is true.
So, like, I would think they aged a little more than when they were like maybe 24 in the first movie.
This is a fair point.
And also, Isaiah was from, wasn't it the like 60s or 70s?
No, it would have been the 50s in the Korean War.
I couldn't remember what war he had mentioned it was, but he's clear. I mean, he's aging slower, but he's still aging.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, I mean, I do think it's kind of interesting that when you look at it like that, it is strange to see that this super soldier serum has been so successful because it's inherently it's from a watered down version of the actual super soldier serum.
Yeah, from the original Patient 1 or Patient 0, Steve Rogers, who really is the Patient 0 of everybody because he's, Bucky's prototype. He's the Red Guardian's
Yeah, but they
prototype.
didn't have his blood.
No, but they got the process from Erskine after seeing the success of Steve.
Yeah, but Bucky wasn't made from Steve's blood. He was his own serum.
No, I'm just saying, like, Steve is the first successful super soldier.
Yeah.
And every other version of it, whether from his blood or not, is some sort of iteration on Erskine's process derived from what worked that one time on Steve.
Fair. Fair. I guess though, now that I'm thinking about it, this is not the most important point. Then Steve got old, so maybe their aging isn't as slowed down as it appears.
Yeah, but here's the thing, like, we don't know. I mean, I always thought they were just slower to age because of the cryogenic freezing.
But that doesn't make sense either because Isaiah can't be that different in age. And if you looked at how old Steve was in Endgame,
It could have just been when Steve chose to come back. You know what I mean? Like, he could have just waited until he was much older to come back.
yeah, like he didn't come back. And yeah, okay.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He just
yeah,
waited
yeah,
until
yeah.
he was like 90 or like, well,
This is me trying to
190.
dissect the super soldier serum on a Tuesday evening.
Yeah, this is, and then you're starting to bring in time travel. Like, I don't want to talk about that scene with
No,
Steve because
that's on me. That's my
yeah,
bad.
I think we should just stop here.
I agree. I think we need to talk a little bit more about the power broker stuff
Yeah.
because while we haven't gotten confirmation, we know from watching already that the power broker is Miss Sharon Carter.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting because when you know that information, I think it starts to really question why she picked up wanting more super soldier serum. That's my big question, or just kind of like, what's your angle of this? And now, from one perspective of it, obviously the power broker's got her hands in a lot of stuff. Could be for trade, could be for, all sorts of things, a bartering chip, if you will. Could be for her own personal group of people around her to have super soldiers around her. Cool. Why else though? Because like those feel like basic versions. Why are you trying to do this? What is the drive behind having the super soldier serum recreated 20 times?
I think it's a few things. If I'm gonna psychoanalyze Sharon Carter here for a second, I think one of the things that struck me when she came on the screen that I didn't remember from my first viewing was how angry she is. I don't think I remembered just how bitter and angry Sharon feels towards the US, towards Sam, towards Bucky, honestly even Cap a little bit.
I mean, I get it.
I totally, I'm not surprised that she feels this way. I just didn't remember her like coming across quite so aggressively at that first meeting.
Yeah.
Honestly, good for her because they all kind of were like, let me get my part in and screw you, Sharon. Like, that's so crappy. Anyway, that aside, all I'm saying is I get you, girl.
It's fair. I mean, as my Bucky apologist, I will just say I felt kind of bad. I felt like he was catching strays. And I was like, listen, my guy barely knew what was going on in Civil War at any given time and was being framed. Although I did have to laugh when she was like, you were trying to protect him because he framed him. And now y'all are just all together having a little party in Madripoor. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, fair.
Yeah.
There was also quite a bit of a time jump since that happened, Sharon, and people have changed.
Yes.
But I was like, my poor guy's out here catching strays, and he literally was newly out of Hydra. Like,
yeah. Also, it was just like this random girl that Steve kissed that one time. Like,
the guy
like,
was
no
still semi
context.
under control. Like, Zemo, let's not forget Zemo actively used the Red Book in Civil War to have Beefy Bucky take on the entirety of the Avengers.
Bucky?
Yeah, it's my favorite. The Red Henley. That's the best scene set of
I mean, it is an iconic look. Like, we knew what you meant by Beefy Bucky.
It's Beefy Bucky. Come on.
Anyway, circling back to Sharon, she is definitely angry. She's bitter. She feels probably betrayed because everybody else got away scot-free, right? They all got their pardons. How many times do they mention that in this show? Right. So I think part of it is in kind of like a spiteful way. She wants to get as much power as she can. Look at the name, the power broker. What comes from power? Having access to things that other people don't have access to, aka the super soldier serum, which to your point can then be used to further her own team and make them even more powerful so that nobody feels safe going up against the power broker, so that her power, her control is completely unquestioned on the island of Madripoor. 2, she can sell it and she can make a lot of money. And as you can see, Sharon is all about making the money. That apartment or whatever that place was that she owned was gorgeous. The woman has actual, like, genuine real art, whereas museums, they make a point to say, have forgeries. She is all about access, she's all about money, she's all about the what it ultimately gives you, which is power. And I think that's a lot of what drove her to get this. And then I think there is a part of her that probably is kind of like F you to everything about what the super soldier serum means, right? What initially made Steve special? He was a super soldier. And she even says, like, I can't even tell my parents where I am. I'm not connected to my family. Think about who her aunt is. Think about what her aunt was involved in. The original development of the super soldier serum, and now she's going to sell it. So now she's going to sully what that means and what it stood for. And yes, I know that's already been done by Hydra, but I think it's Sharon's way of saying F you to everything I was raised to believe, because at the end of the day, nobody helped me when I did the right thing. And I'm out here fending for myself.
Yeah. I mean, she also grew up, as you kind of touched on a little bit, but she grew up fully faithful in the system. And the system was created by her aunt.
Yep.
And Steve is actually the one who, if you really want to think about it, ripped that entire system apart. And now I understand why. Let's not forget Hydra was literally growing from within. But he is the one who came in, not only ripped that system apart, but then asked her to go against her country, essentially, because he was already becoming a semi-fugitive at that point, and help him. She did so, and everybody else was fine. Steve, in fact, went back, and whether she knows this or not, went back to marry her aunt,
Yeah.
which has its own weird things about
I
that.
don't want to talk about that.
No, we're good. But he literally went back to live his whole life. So not only did he get to do the whole Avenger thing, be able to save the day, be the big one that came back and saved the day, he then went to go back in time and relive his life as if that never and none of this ever happened. He got to have a normal, regular life.
Yep.
And so he gets off the hook. I will say, and I think some of it is because she can't really get after Steve. Sam and Bucky are also catching strays a little here. Because
Yeah.
yes, they got pardoned, but you also have to think these guys were both snapped. It's made to me very obvious in these conversations she was not.
Yeah.
And in their defense, they were snapped, came back, battle Thanos, and then it's like, yeah, these guys are heroes, you
Yeah.
know? So, like, it's also been 5 years since they were on the run,
Yeah.
since they disappeared. So, a lot of people moved on. There was so much confusion. All people understood was they helped save the day. Politely, Sharon, you were not there at that point.
At that point, she was probably already the power broker.
Right. And I'm sure if she had helped save the day, she would have been pardoned by now too.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened, and that's okay. That's just like these are just the facts. So again, I do feel like they were kind of catching a little strays there too, because it's like it's really not their fault they even got pardoned. They literally were brought back in the midst of a battle. Like
Yeah.
they were brought back and told you're fighting. And they were also dusted in the midst of a battle, and that was just the reality for them. So it's a little different, and I do understand being angry because also nobody really thought about her during that time. I'm talking about somebody like Steve who was around.
Yeah.
Never really considered what the consequences of that looked like, of his actions, how he, did or didn't screw her over, and he was around for those 5 years.
Yeah. That's fair.
So that stuff causes a lot of anger and, to your point, resentment. And now you have his two best buds, his
Yeah.
right hand men, if you will, right and left. And sorry, I had to make if there's gonna be an arm or a hand joke, I gotta make it to something. I have to.
Where's Rocket when you need him?
I know. But you got them here. Meanwhile, Zemo, who started the whole thing, is also here. I get it. I do get it. It's understandable.
Yeah, I mean, I remember not liking Sharon very much. I don't think I've ever really liked Sharon all that much.
I remember you absolutely hating Sharon.
I don't know why.
I think you just were really deep in your Cap era, and you
Yeah.
didn't really love that he had a love interest.
That feels right.
Yeah.
As someone who is older now and able to empathize better, I do feel
What?
kind
You're
of
not 16 anymore?
I know. Guys, I'm really far from 16 and I don't want to talk about how far. But I will say, like, I feel a lot of empathy for her. I think she made a lot of bad decisions. Like, she is a bad guy now.
Yeah.
Like, and that's a bummer for her. And also, like, we're never going to see that play out. So, okay, go live your bad guy life, Sharon.
See, that's what I want to kind of touch on slightly is the slight frustration around this is of her not really going anywhere. Obviously, we know at the end because this is remembered, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth in episode 6, but we know she's pardoned. Sam does what he asks.
She gets her job back at the CIA.
Yeah. Or I'm sorry, Sam does as he said he would or whatever. But regardless, like he made a commitment, he follows through, and she gets back on US territory, gets her job back, and yet we know she's still the power broker. She
Yeah.
makes that ominous phone call. And what frustrates me is like Cap 4 was right there.
I know.
Like it was right there.
Cap 4 also wasn't about Cap or anybody related to Cap.
I understand that, but like they made a movie that is a sequel to this series and it was right there. You set her up. So it is frustrating because I'm not really sure why we didn't have that be Cap 4. I think it would have done numbers
Yeah.
for it, truly. I think it would have gone down the usual Captain America route and I think it really would have helped the movie in and of itself. It's also a villain he semi helped create.
Yes, for sure. Or at least get more power and more access.
Well, not only help get more power, but like he was around during her villain origin and he is partially part of what happened. Not saying he's the one who inherently made her act the way she did or anything like that. At the end of the day, it is primarily all on Steve, but he is actively part of the group that asked her to help them and never thought twice about it and never looked for her or never anything again.
Well, because not to mention, we talked about the 5 years where he was dusted, but there was 2 years before that.
And they were on the run. She would have been on the run.
Yeah.
Nobody ran into each other.
Yeah.
Or thought to run into each other.
Yeah. So, like, that's the thing. Like, they're out there with Natasha, and Wanda, and that's their little quartet of nomads, if you will. But they just were like, bye, Sharon. Good luck. Like, I also would be like, hello, a little help. Like, and it's not like Sharon is like a regular person in the sense that she would be dead weight. This is a trained SHIELD agent now in the CIA. We just watched her literally kick butt by herself in this episode. She's not a liability. She actually would have been an asset, and she probably has a ton of contacts. So, like, what? I too would be like, hello, what are you doing?
Yeah. But then for them to not continue that thread and really being quite blunt here, she brings no value anymore to where the MCU is. She doesn't.
It's so far beyond the idea of the power broker that it's like going back would be a huge step backwards.
Well, and just where we are right now, we're culminating another saga and then we are moving into the X-Men and we don't really know how heavily involved we're going to be on the Avengers front. And it's not that she couldn't appear, but honestly, there's just so many other characters I'd rather see at this point.
The one thing I will say, though, is I think Wolverine mentions Madripoor in Deadpool and Wolverine. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly in the comics, I think he has some comic connections to Madripoor. And as we know, she's like the queen of Madripoor. So I don't know how you would work it in. I'm just saying there are some connections there.
Which is fair. And it's not that I'm not saying there aren't. It's just more, I don't think they're heavy enough for us to go down that route when you didn't even bother with the people who actually, like, she had the vendetta against.
That's fair. It would definitely be a weaker plot point than it would have been in Cap 4.
It would be. And I also think there's so many interesting plots that we will probably go down with the X-Men that I just don't really, I'm not sitting here like, oh yeah, the power broker's it.
Yeah, I definitely don't think she'd be like a foe, but I could see her coming up in some way or another, continuing to stay relevant in one way.
Yeah, that's fair.
Then maybe in Cap 5, there's a way to like bring Cap back to like the actual like political intrigue that should be driving a Captain America movie, not political intrigue that's actually really just like the Red Hulk and continuing a storyline from a movie that most people forget even exists because it only quasi is part of the MCU because Mark Ruffalo and Edward Norton have different faces.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we are in a good place to call it for Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 3, now that we are officially halfway through the show. You can follow us on your podcast platform of choice to stay up with all of our new podcast episodes. And also, we will be doing Sister Scoop across all platforms now, not just on YouTube. So you can get that on your podcast platform of choice as well. Some video, some audio, just depending on whether or not your platform supports video. And as always, you can check out our website and our Buy Me a Coffee, both of which are linked in the show notes below.
You guys can also give us a follow on all of our socials, also linked in the show notes down below. And while we are gearing up in this replay, sadly, we have to pump the brakes on it sadly, only because we are gearing up, but not sadly because we are very excited, because we are starting Wonder Man coverage next week. So keep your eyes open. We will be doing our predictions episode of the series. We're very much looking forward to it. They've been releasing more and more trailers over the past couple days. So if you guys haven't been seeing them, go ahead, check them out. Go on Marvel's socials. They're all over the place. So make sure you guys are watching them. Nothing's being given away so far. We don't really know what's going to happen. So that means as of right now, our predictions episode is going to be real wonky, but that's
Wild.
okay. It's going to be a little wild. We're pretty untethered here, but that's all right. That's always the fun part. And make sure you guys are listening to us there as Marvel just blew your mind. So let's talk about it.